Welcome, friend. We're venturing today into some, let's say, less explored territory, into the shadows of a text many think they know inside out. Forget the comforting verses for a moment. Today is about the whispers, the strange bargains, the frankly unsettling passages hidden within the Bible.
It's true. Beneath the familiar stories, there are these narratives that are quite jarring, often skipped over maybe, or interpreted in ways that soften the edges.
Yeah, definitely softened.
So we've gathered some of these. They come from different times, different authors, which explains some of the variety, I think.
Right.
Our mission, if you will, is to just look at them, unearth these strange stories, and try to understand maybe why they're there, what they tell us about the people who wrote them down.
Okay, let's start with one that always feels deeply disturbing. The story of Job.
Ah, Job.
I mean, the setup itself is just wild.
The righteous man.
Yeah, right. And he basically becomes collateral damage in a bet between God and, well, Satan.
It is profoundly unsettling. The idea that the divine would essentially permit such intense suffering. We're talking losing everything, wealth, family, his own health. Horrific boils the works.
And all as a test to see if he'd break, to see if his faith would hold.
Exactly. And what's fascinating and kind of terrifying is that through it all, he doesn't curse God. He questions, he laments, he's in agony, but he doesn't curse.
Then God finally answers him, but not with an explanation. It's more like a rebuke from a storm cloud.
Pretty much. It's basically, who are you, Job, to question the workings of the universe I created? There's no neat answer given for why he suffered so terribly.
Which is maybe the most unsettling part. The lack of a clear reason.
It forces you to confront inexplicable suffering. And yeah, God eventually restores Job's fortunes, doubles them even. But it doesn't erase what happened, does it?
No, it really doesn't. It lingers. Okay, from that personal torment, let's shift to something more public and supernatural. The writing on the wall.
Oh, Belshazzar's feast.
Yeah.
Yes. Daniel. This one has a real sense of like theatrical dread.
Totally. You've got this king, Belshazzar, throwing a huge party using sacred cups looted from the temple in Jerusalem.
Which is a massive act of hubris and sacrilege in the context of the story.
Right. And then, bam, a hand just appears, writing on the plaster.
Just a disembodied hand. Can you imagine the panic? And the message it writes, in Aramaic, none of his wise men can figure it out.
The tension must have been unbearable.
Then Daniel comes in, the prophet, and he reads it clear as day. Mene, tickle, parson?
Meaning?
Basically, your kingdom has been measured, found wanting, and will be divided and given away. Your time is up.
And the scary part is how fast it happens.
Immediately. That very night, the story says, Belshazzar is assassinated and the kingdom falls. It's a stark, swift judgment.
Wow. Okay, let's move to something that involves just horrific violence against the innocent, the massacre of the innocents.
Ah, yes. Matthew's gospel. This one is deeply chilling, especially tied to the nativity story.
King Herod hears from the Magi about a newborn king of the Jews, and he's terrified for his throne.
Pure paranoia. He pretends he wants to worship the child, ask the Magi to report back. But they're warned in a dream not to.
And Joseph also gets a dream warning, right? To flee with Mary and Jesus.
Yes, they escape to Egypt. But Herod, realizing he's been tricked, just flies into this rage.
And orders the unthinkable.
He orders his soldiers to go through Bethlehem and kill every single male child aged 2 years and under. Just wholesale slaughter.
It's brutal. Just a horrifying act born of fear and power. Hard to reconcile with the usual Christmas images.
Very hard. It casts a very dark shadow over that whole narrative.
Okay, shifting gears again, but staying with divine judgment. Sodom and Gomorrah. These names are basically shorthand for thin.
They really are. Genesis describes the inhabitants as incredibly wicked. But it's not just one thing. It's cruelty, blasphemy, materialism, and a really profound lack of hospitality, which was a huge deal back then.
Right. Wasn't there that whole thing with Abraham pleading with God?
Yes. Abraham bargains, basically. What if there are 50 righteous people? 40, 30, 10. And God agrees, if 10 righteous can be found, the cities will be spared.
But they couldn't find 10.
Apparently not. Only Lot is deemed worth saving, along with his family. He shows hospitality to these disguised angels.
And the townsmen react terribly.
Horrifically. They surround Lot's house, demanding to assault the visitors. Lot even offers his own daughters instead, which is another disturbing element.
Yeah, it's awful.
The angels intervene, strike the mob blind, and hurry Lot and his family out.
With that famous warning,
"Don't look back." But Lot's wife does. Just a glance. And she's turned into a pillar of salt.
Such a bizarre, specific punishment.
It really is. And then fire and brimstone rain down, completely obliterating the cities. Total destruction.
Okay, from fire on earth to, well, something truly nightmarish from the book of Revelation. The locusts from the abyss.
Oh, Revelation. Yeah, this is where things get really strange. Apocalyptic imagery cranked up to 11.
Describe these locusts. They aren't normal insects, are they?
Not even close. They're described like war horses, but with crowns, human faces, women's hair, lion's teeth.
Wait, women's hair and lion's teeth?
Yep. And iron breastplates. And their tails have scorpion stingers. The sound of their wings is like thunder, like chariots charging. It's terrifying imagery.
And they have a leader.
Yes, the angel of the abyss. His name is Abaddon, or Apollyon in Greek. It means the destroyer.
Chilling. And what do?
Their mission isn't to eat crops, but to torment people, specifically those who don't have the seal of God on their foreheads. For 5 months. Just pure torment.
Psychological warfare, almost.
Kind of seems that way. It's symbolic, obviously, but the symbolism is designed to be deeply unsettling.
Definitely succeeds there. Okay, let's touch on maybe the most famous divine punishments, the plagues of Egypt.
Right, back to Exodus. The context here is crucial. The Hebrews have been enslaved for centuries.
And Moses is sent by God to tell Pharaoh, let my people go.
Pharaoh, of course, refuses, repeatedly. And each refusal triggers another plague, escalating in severity.
Can we quickly list them? It's quite the sequence.
Sure. You've got the Nile turning to blood, then frogs everywhere, then lice or gnats, depending on the translation, then swarms of flies.
Okay, already unpleasant.
Then disease kills the Egyptian livestock, then painful boils break out on people and animals, then destructive hail mixed with fire.
Hail and fire.
Yeah. Then swarms of locusts that devour everything left. Then 3 days of complete darkness.
And the final, most terrible one.
The death of the firstborn sons of Egypt, humans and animals. Only the Hebrew homes marked with lamb's blood on the doorposts were spared. That's the origin of Passover.
It's an incredible display of power, but also just relentless destruction visited upon an entire population because of their leader's stubbornness.
It absolutely is. It's liberation for one group through the devastation of another.
Now for maybe the ultimate act of divine destruction. Noah's flood.
Genesis again. This one is just staggering in its scale, wiping the slate clean globally.
And the reason given.
The text says the earth was filled with corruption and violence. Humanity had gone completely off the rails, basically. So God decides to destroy all life.
Except for Noah, his family, and the animals.
Right. Instructions to build this massive ark, gather pairs of every kind of creature. It's an epic undertaking.
And the flood itself. How long did it last?
40 days and nights of rain. The waters cover the earth for 150 days, and they're actually in the ark for over a year in total.
Imagine emerging to nothing. A completely empty, drowned world.
It's a desolate image, and the text emphasizes this is the only time God carried out such a threat on a global scale, a complete reset.
Okay, let's narrow the focus again. Ezekiel's prophecy against Jerusalem, another fiery judgment.
Yeah, Ezekiel uses this really intense, visceral imagery. God is furious with Jerusalem for its sins, its idolatry, its disobedience.
And the images.
He compares the population to different metals. Bronze, tin, iron, lead being gathered together inside the city as if it were a furnace.
A furnace?
Yes. And God's fiery wrath will melt them down. It's this idea of purification through extreme destructive heat. Punishment as refining.
That's a harsh metaphor. Being melted by divine anger.
It's incredibly potent. It speaks to the severity of the judgment believed to be coming.
We can't really talk about unsettling biblical suffering without discussing the passion of Christ.
Oh, no, absolutely not. The Gospels recount Jesus' suffering in stark detail leading up to his death.
Starting with the agony in the Garden of Gethsemane.
Yes. Where his anguish is so intense, Luke says he sweat drops of blood. Then the trial, the condemnation.
And the scourging. That sounds particularly brutal.
The Roman flagellum was a horrific instrument. Leather strips, embedded with bone or metal, designed to tear flesh, extremely painful, causing deep wounds.
Then being forced to carry his own cross, crucifixion itself.
Crucifixion was designed for maximum pain and public humiliation, often naked. Death could be slow from exposure, exhaustion, asphyxiation, though the Gospels suggest Jesus died relatively quickly, within hours.
And the key point, really, is that he endured all this, according to the text, without having committed any crime. Innocent suffering on a profound level.
Exactly. It's central to Christian theology, but the physical reality described is undeniably brutal and disturbing.
And after death, for the wicked, the Bible describes the lake of fire.
Primarily in Revelation, yes. It's depicted as the ultimate final punishment. More than just hell, maybe.
How's it described in Revelation?
Well, after the final battles between good and evil, the Antichrist figure and the false prophet are captured, and they're thrown alive into the lake burning with sulfur.
Alive.
Yeah. Then Satan, after being imprisoned for 1,000 years and then leading one last rebellion, is also cast into the lake of fire to be tormented day and night forever.
So it's eternal torment.
That's the description. And then there's the final judgment, where those not found in the Book of Life are also thrown in. It's the ultimate separation from God, depicted in the most terrifying terms.
Okay, let's shift to a more grounded but still gruesome story, the beheading of John the Baptist.
Right, this is in the Gospels too. King Herod Antipas had imprisoned John for criticizing his marriage to Herodias, his brother's wife.
And the setup is Herod's birthday feast.
Exactly. Herodias' daughter, Salome, dances for Herod and his guests. He's completely captivated, maybe drunk, and makes this rash oath. Ask for anything you want, up to half my kingdom, and I'll give it to you.
A terrible promise to make.
Especially when Salome goes to her mother, Herodias, who hates John, and Herodias tells her what to ask for.
On the Baptist's head.
On a platter. Salome goes back and asks for it. Immediately.
And Herod is horrified, right? But he feels bound by his oath.
The text says he was distressed, but because of his oath and his guests, he felt he couldn't refuse. So he orders it done. John is beheaded in prison, and his head is brought in on a platter and given to Salome, who gives it to her mother.
Just cold-blooded revenge, facilitated by a foolish promise. Chilling.
Very much so.
Now, there's a verse in the Psalms that is incredibly difficult. Psalm 137.
Ah, yes. By the rivers of Babylon. This one contains probably one of the most disturbing lines in the Bible.
Remind us of the context.
It's written from the perspective of the Jewish exiles, forcibly taken from Jerusalem to Babylon after their city was destroyed. They're grieving, tormented by their captors.
And the verse.
Towards the end, it's a cry for vengeance against Babylon, ending with, "Happy shall he be who takes your little ones and dashes them against the rock."
Yeah, that's incredibly raw and violent, wishing that on infants.
It's a visceral expression of absolute rage and trauma from people who had likely witnessed horrific atrocities themselves. It's not prescriptive, but it's a reflection of the depths of despair and desire for vengeance they felt. Still, very jarring to read.
Absolutely. Okay, another story involving violence in children, though in a very different way. Elisha and the bears.
2 Kings. This one is just bizarre. The prophet Elisha is walking along, and a group of youths or children come out of a town and start mocking him, shouting, "Go up, you bald head! Go up, you bald head!"
Kids being cruel, basically.
Seems like it. But Elisha turns around, curses them in the name of the Lord, and then 2 female bears come out of the woods and maul 42 of them.
42. Mauled by bears.
Yeah.
For calling him bald.
That's what the text says. Some argue children might mean young men or servants, implying maybe a more serious threat or disrespect to a prophet. But even so, the punishment seems wildly disproportionate.
Yeah, it's a head-scratcher. Divine bear attack for insults. Very strange.
Definitely one of the odder, more disturbing miracle stories.
Speaking of disturbing things happening to children, the story of Joram and the cannibal mothers.
Oh, this is grim. Also, 2 Kings, during a terrible famine caused by a siege of Samaria, things are desperate.
How desperate?
So desperate that the king, Joram, is confronted by a woman who tells him this horrific story. She and another woman made a pact. "Give up your son today so we may eat him, and tomorrow we'll eat my son."
Oh my God.
They boiled and ate the first woman's son, but then when it was the second woman's turn, she hid her son.
So the first woman is appealing to the king.
Yes, demanding justice in a way. But the real point of the story within the narrative is to show King Joram just how horrific the situation is. The absolute depths of starvation and despair caused by the siege.
It's just unimaginable. A truly bleak picture of human suffering.
It really is, designed to shock, and it does.
Okay, back to Revelation for a moment. Those beasts, not the locusts this time, but other entities.
Right. Revelation is full of symbolic creatures. There are the 4 living creatures around the throne, often interpreted as representing aspects of creation or the Gospels, like a lion, an ox, a man, an eagle, each with 6 wings and covered in eyes.
Eyes everywhere. Creepy.
Very. Then there are the beasts that rise from the sea and the earth, representing political and religious powers opposed to God, often depicted as monstrous composites.
And they gather for the final battle.
Yes, they align with the false prophet and gather the kings of the earth for the Battle of Armageddon.
But they're ultimately defeated.
Overthrown by Christ, yes, and cast into the lake of fire, like the Antichrist and false prophet mentioned earlier. The imagery is grotesque, meant to symbolize the monstrous nature of evil.
It certainly paints a picture. Now, for a story often praised for wisdom, but the method, the judgment of Solomon.
First Kings, the classic dilemma.
Oh.
2 women, 1 living baby, both claim it's theirs. How do you decide?
And Solomon's solution is shocking.
He calls for a sword and says, cut the living child in 2 and give half to the one and half to the other.
Just like that, proposing to kill the baby.
Exactly. It's a bluff, of course, a psychological test. The real mother immediately cries out, "Oh, my lord, give her the living child and by no means slay it," while the other woman says, "It shall be neither mine nor yours, divide it."
And that reveals the true mother.
Precisely. Her selflessness exposes her love, so Solomon gives her the baby. It's hailed as great wisdom, but you have to admit, the initial order is deeply unsettling.
Yeah, suggesting infanticide as a judicial tool, it's quite something.
It shows his willingness to use extreme measures to find the truth.
Okay, another quick, strange, and slightly gruesome one from Exodus, Zipporah circumcising her son.
Right, this happens while Moses is on his way back to Egypt. It's very abrupt. God apparently meets Moses and seeks to kill him, though the reason isn't explicitly stated.
And Zipporah reacts how?
She takes a flint knife, cuts off her son's foreskin, and touches Moses' feet with it, saying something like, "Surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me."
A bridegroom of blood? What does that even mean?
It's very obscure. The interpretation often is that Moses had failed to circumcise his son according to the covenant, and Zipporah's quick action, maybe using the blood rite, appeased God's anger and saved Moses' life.
But it's just dropped in there, this sudden bloody ritualistic act. Very strange.
Extremely enigmatic. One of those passages scholars debate endlessly.
Then there's Ezekiel's vision of the dry bones. Powerful, but also quite macabre.
Very macabre, especially at the start. Ezekiel is shown a valley just full of dry, scattered human bones, a scene of total death and desolation.
And then what happens?
God asks him, "Can these bones live?" Then commands him to prophesy to the bones. As he speaks, there is this rattling sound, and the bones start coming together, skeleton to skeleton.
Right.
Then sinews appear on them, then flesh covers them, then skin, but there's no breath in them yet. They're like reanimated corpses.
Okay, that's eerie.
Then Ezekiel prophesies to the wind, or spirit, and breath enters them, and they stand up, a vast army.
And the meaning is?
God explains it's a metaphor for the house of Israel, exiled and feeling hopeless, like dry bones. But God promises to restore them, bring them back to life and back to their land. So it's ultimately hopeful, but the imagery is undeniably Gothic.
Definitely Gothic.
Yeah.
Okay, Hosea's prophecy about the fall of Samaria. Another one with terrifying predictions.
Hosea uses his own tragic marriage to an unfaithful wife, Gomer, as an allegory for Israel's unfaithfulness to God through idolatry.
And the consequences prophesied for Samaria, the capital of the northern kingdom.
They are horrific. Total desolation, death by the sword. Their infants will be dashed to pieces and their pregnant women ripped open.
Just brutal, explicit violence.
Absolutely. It's meant as a terrifying warning against abandoning God. Though, interestingly, the book ends with Hosea reconciling with Gomer, suggesting hope for Israel's eventual restoration if they return to God.
That mix of brutal warning and potential mercy again.
It's a common pattern in the prophetic books.
Let's talk about Dinah. Genesis again. This story is just layers of wrong.
It really is. Jacob's daughter, Dinah, goes to visit the women of Shechem. The local prince's son, also named Shechem, seizes her, and violates her.
And then he decides he loves her and wants to marry her.
Yes, he asks his father, Hamor, to arrange the marriage. They approach Jacob and his sons.
And her brothers are understandably furious.
Enraged, but they pretend to agree with one condition. All the men of Shechem must be circumcised to become like them before they'll allow intermarriage.
A deceptive plan.
Totally. The men of Shechem agree, wanting the alliance and the potential wealth, they all get circumcised. Then, on the 3rd day, when they're still in pain and vulnerable,
What happened?
2 of Dinah's brothers, Simeon and Levi, go into the city with swords and kill every single male, including Hamor and Shechem. They rescue Dinah and plunder the entire city, flocks, herds, wealth, women, children.
It's an absolute massacre. Revenge taken to an horrific extreme.
Way beyond proportional. Jacob actually condemns them for it later, fearing repercussions. It's a story of violation followed by brutal, excessive vengeance.
Okay, Elijah again, the showdown on Mount Carmel. This one is dramatic.
1 Kings. Elijah is confronting the rampant worship of Baal, promoted by King Ahab and his wife Jezebel. He challenges 450 prophets of Baal to a contest.
The fire contest.
Exactly. 2 altars, 2 bowls. Each side calls on their god to send fire to consume the sacrifice. The prophets of Baal pray, chant, cut themselves all day long. Nothing happens.
Then Elijah's turn.
He rebuilds the Lord's altar, digs a trench, puts the wood and the bowl on, and then has them douse the whole thing with water 3 times until the trench is full, making it seemingly impossible to light.
Raising the stakes.
Then he says a simple prayer, and boom! Fire from heaven consumes the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, the dust, and even laps up the water in the trench. A spectacular display.
And the people's reaction.
They fall on their faces shouting, "The Lord, He's God! The Lord, He is God!"
But then comes the unsettling part.
Elijah tells the people, "Seize the prophets of Baal, let not one of them escape." They seize them. Elijah takes them down to the Kishon Brook and slaughters them all. 450 men.
So divine victory followed immediately by mass execution of the religious opponents.
It's a stark reminder of the violent religious conflicts depicted in these texts.
Now, perhaps one of the most disturbing stories in the entire Bible. The Levite and his concubine, Book of Judges.
This one is just profoundly dark. It's set during a time when there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes, which is context for the moral chaos.
What happens?
A Levite is traveling with his concubine. They need lodging for the night in Gibeah, a Benjamite town. No one offers hospitality until an old man takes them in.
But then trouble starts.
A mob of wicked men from the town surrounds the house, banging on the door, demanding the old man send out the Levite so they can gang rape him.
Horrifying. And the old man's response.
Equally horrifying. He offers the mob his own virgin daughter and the Levite's concubine instead. "Do with them what seems good to you," he says.
He offers the women.
Yes. The Levite then pushes his concubine out the door to the mob. They abuse her all night long. In the morning, he finds her collapse on the doorstep, dead or dying.
It's just devastating. But it gets worse, doesn't it?
Unbelievably, yes. The Levite puts her body on his donkey, takes her home, and then takes a knife, cuts her body into 12 pieces, and sends 1 piece to each of the 12 tribes of Israel.
Why?
As a gruesome call to arms, to show them the atrocity committed by the Benjamites and incite revenge. It leads to a brutal civil war. It's arguably the lowest point depicted in the book. A story of complete societal and moral breakdown. Just awful.
Let's touch on some broader themes that are unsettling. The Bible's apparent approval, or at least regulation, of slavery.
Yes, this is undeniable and deeply problematic for modern readers. Exodus, for instance, right alongside the 10 Commandments, includes rules for buying and selling Hebrew slaves and different rules for non-Hebrew slaves.
And some of those rules are disturbing.
Very. There's a passage distinguishing between a master beating a slave who dies immediately, the master is punished, versus a slave who survives a day or 2 before dying. The master is not punished because the slave is considered his property.
That's chilling. The idea that economic loss is the main consideration.
Exactly. And these passages were tragically used for centuries to justify chattel slavery. It's a dark part of the text's legacy.
Similarly, the persecution of non-believers or those with different beliefs.
Deuteronomy is quite stark on this. It commands the immediate execution by stoning of anyone, even a close family member, like a brother or son or daughter or wife, who tries to entice you to worship other gods. No mercy, no pity, no sparing them.
Wow. Kill your own family for suggesting another religion.
That's the command given in that text. And in Numbers, there's an account where God commands Moses to wage war against the Midianites.
And the outcome.
The Israelite army initially kills all the men and captures the women and children. But Moses is furious they spared the women. He orders them to kill all the male children and all the women who were not virgins. Only the virgin girls were kept alive, presumably as slaves or spoils of war.
That's genocidal, and explicitly targets non-virgin women.
It's extremely disturbing by any standard.
Oh, what about the Ark of the Covenant? Sacred object, but also dangerous?
Oh, very dangerous in the narrative. It's this gold-covered chest holding the 10 Commandments tablets. In 1 Samuel, after being captured and returned, it causes havoc. In one town, 70 men are struck dead just for looking into it.
70 people dead for looking.
That's the story. And perhaps even more famous or infamous is Uzzah.
What happened to Uzzah?
They're transporting the ark on a cart. The oxen stumble, and Uzzah reaches out his hand to steady the ark to stop it from falling, and God strikes him dead on the spot for touching it.
He was trying to help.
Seems that way, right? But the implication is that the ark's holiness was so absolute, even a well-intentioned but unauthorized touch was a fatal transgression. It feels incredibly harsh.
Very harsh. Stoning as a punishment also appears frequently.
Yes, it was a prescribed method of execution for various offenses in the Old Testament law codes. It's inherently brutal, a community participation in killing someone with rocks.
What kind of things warranted stoning?
Deuteronomy mentions things like being a stubborn and rebellious son who ignores his parents there to bring him to the elders, and the men of the city stone him.
Rebellious teenager. Stoned.
Seems so. Also, a bride accused by her husband of not being a virgin on their wedding night. If her parents couldn't produce the tokens of virginity, she was to be stoned at the door of her father's house.
That puts immense pressure and risk on women.
Absolutely. The burden of proof seems skewed, and the punishment is lethal.
Another unsettling theme. People being punished for other sins.
The story of King David, Bathsheba, and Uriah is a prime example. David commits adultery with Bathsheba, Uriah's wife, then arranges for Uriah to be killed in battle to cover it up.
Classic abuse of power.
Definitely. And the prophet Nathan confronts David, and God declares judgment. But the punishment doesn't fall solely or even primarily on David himself.
Who suffers?
The child born from David and Bathsheba's adulterous union. God strikes a child with illness, and despite David's fasting and praying, the baby dies.
So the innocent child pays the price for the parent's sin. That feels profoundly unjust.
It raises difficult theological questions about collective guilt and divine justice that many find troubling.
Even animals aren't always safe. There's that strange story with Jesus and the pigs.
Matthew's Gospel, yes. Jesus encounters two men possessed by demons, living among tombs, extremely violent.
And the demons recognize Jesus.
Immediately, they cry out, basically asking if he's come to torment them before the appointed time. Then they make a request. If you cast us out, send us away into the herd of swine. There happened to be a large herd of pigs feeding nearby.
And Jesus agrees.
He just says, go. So the demons come out of the men and enter the pigs, and the entire herd, maybe 2,000 pigs according to Mark's account, rushes down a steep bank into the lake and drowns.
Why? Why destroy the pigs? It seems random and destructive.
It's often interpreted as demonstrating the destructive nature of the demons or Jesus' authority over them, but the economic loss to the pig herders and the sheer strangeness of it makes it unsettling for some.
And there are some statements attributed to Jesus that sound harsh, especially about family.
Luke's gospel has a particularly strong one. If anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple.
Hate your family, that sounds extreme.
It's generally interpreted hyperbolically, meaning that loyalty to Christ must take precedence over all other ties, even the closest family bonds. It signifies absolute commitment. But the word hate is jarring.
And didn't Matthew mention something about self-mutilation?
Yes, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus uses hyperbole again. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out. If your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off. Better to lose a part of your body than have your whole body thrown into hell. Again, likely not literal, but shocking imagery to convey the seriousness of avoiding sin.
Definitely shocking. What about Jonah? We think of the whale, but his story is a bit odd too.
Yeah, Jonah. God tells him to go preach against the wicked city of Nineveh, but Jonah doesn't want to. He basically runs away in the opposite direction, gets on a ship heading for Tarshish.
Trying to flee from God. Seems futile.
Pretty much. God sends a huge storm. The sailors figure out Jonah is the cause, and they reluctantly throw him overboard at his own suggestion.
And then the fish.
God appoints a great fish, often called a whale, though the text just says great fish to swallow Jonah, and he's inside the belly of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights.
As punishment.
Seems like it. A very strange, claustrophobic punishment for disobedience before he finally prays and gets vomited out onto dry land to go do what he was told in the first place.
Just a bizarre detour. Swallowed alive for 3 days.
It really is.
Finally, let's touch on the treatment of women in some passages. We mentioned Dinah and the law about virginity, but there are others.
Yes, the texts reflect the patriarchal societies they originated from. Leviticus has laws about ritual impurity after childbirth. A woman is considered unclean for longer, and the purification offering required is different if she gives birth to a girl compared to a boy.
Implying female birth causes more impurity.
That's how it reads. There's also the law we touched on briefly. If a man rapes an unmarried virgin, he must pay her father the bride price, marry her, and he can never divorce her.
So the victim is forced to marry her attacker.
That appears to be the consequence outlined in that specific law in Deuteronomy. It's presented perhaps as protecting her economic future in a society where her marriage prospects might be ruined, but from a modern perspective, it seems horrific.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
So we've covered a lot of ground here, a lot of quite dark and unsettling passages.
We have, and it's important, I think, to acknowledge how disturbing many of these stories are. The questions they raise about justice, divine nature, human cruelty.
Right. They aren't easy passages. But, as our source material suggests, they are part of the foundation of Judeo-Christian culture and morality, even the parts that seem incomprehensible or alien now.
They were likely intended to teach lessons, show God's power, stress obedience within their own context, even if that context feels very distant and sometimes disturbing to us.
So maybe the final thought for you, listening, is how do these ancient, strange, sometimes dark narratives still resonate? How do they, perhaps subtly, still shape ideas and values today, even with all their mystery and shadow?
That's definitely something worth pondering. How these deep, often unsettling roots continue to influence the present. It invites, I think, a deeper look, more critical engagement with these texts and their history.
Indeed. Something to think about as we leave the shadows for now. Until next time, keep exploring those hidden corners.